Breaking news here now at 4. A verdict in the tax fraud trial involving the Trump Organization. A jury in Manhattan has found the company guilty on all counts, 17 of them, which included criminal tax fraud and falsifying business records. The charges against the company included that it was paying the personal expenses of some executives without reporting them as income. Former President Donald Trump is not personally charged with any crime. In a statement just released by the Trump Organization, a spokesperson said, in part, the fact that any company could be held responsible for an employee's actions on their personal tax returns is simply preposterous.
And now back to our breaking news. The guilty verdict in the Trump Organization tax fraud trial. It came at the end of the second day of deliberations.
CBS 2's Alice Gaynor live at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan with the details. Alice.
After 2 days of deliberations, during which the jury sent several notes requesting testimony readback and readback of the counts, today it found 2 entities under the Trump Organization guilty on all counts that include conspiracy, falsifying business records, criminal tax fraud, and scheme to defraud. The Trump Organization calls the verdict preposterous and says it plans to appeal.
2 entities within the Trump Organization, the Trump Corporation and Trump Payroll Corporation, were accused of paying top execs perks off the books to avoid taxes. Former President Donald Trump was not charged, but his name came up often. During closing arguments, prosecutors said Mr. Trump was in on the alleged scheme, telling the judge after the defense objected, quote, "The fact is this was sanctioned, and that the practice was known to Mr. Trump directly rebuts that incorrect narrative that the defense has been spinning since day one of this trial." The defense maintained the Trump family and his company were betrayed by former CFO Alan Weisselberg, and that they had no idea and have not been accused of any crimes, repeating the same phrase throughout the trial. Weisselberg did it for Weisselberg, arguing the company did not benefit. We are here today for one reason and one reason only, the greed of Alan Weisselberg. Weisselberg took the stand for several days, meant to be a key witness for the prosecution after taking a plea deal. But he's still a senior advisor at the company and still being paid his same CFO salary. He pled guilty to 15 counts of fraud and tax evasion back in August for receiving nearly $2 million in off-the-books compensation for luxury cars, an apartment, private school tuition for his grandkids, and other perks. He testified Trump or one of his sons would sign off on tuition checks for Weisselberg's grandkids. Trump signed off on the apartment lease. Prosecutors argued the company was liable because Weisselberg and company controller Jeffrey McConney, who testified with immunity, were high managerial agents acting in behalf of the company and within the scope of their employment. When asked why he didn't ask for a raise instead of the perks, Weisselberg said the company would have had to pay double, raising his salary enough to cover both the perks and added income tax. He told the court the company benefited.
This was a case about lying and cheating, false documents to the end of evading taxes for the benefit of individuals and the corporations. They've now been held accountable.
Did you expect a guilty on all counts?
I'm not going to comment further.
Now, a spokesperson for the Trump Organization released a statement that reads, quote, Mr. Weisselberg testified under oath that he betrayed the trust the company had placed in him and that he at all times acted solely for his own personal gain and out of his own personal greed. The notion that a company could be held responsible for an employee's actions to benefit themselves on their own personal tax returns is simply preposterous. Sentencing will be held mid-January. The company could be fined upwards of close to $2 million. In Lower Manhattan, Alice Gaynor, CBS 2 News.
All right, Alice, thank you.
So what does all this mean for the future of the Trump Organization and the former president himself?
Legal expert Andrew Lieb joins us now with more on those questions. Andrew, thanks for joining us. So we hear that Weisselberg is now prosecuted with that plea deal, but what about the rest of this organization, the family members specifically?
I think this is the first shoe to drop. I don't know if we all saw yesterday, but Alvin Braggs, who's the Manhattan DA, just brought on Matthew Colangelo, who's a former DOJ prosecutor who's formerly went after Trump. That's a shoe that we got to be watching. And let's not forget Attorney General Tish James, who already has a monitor against the Trump Organization. There's a lot more shoes to drop, and what an interesting, juicy story to be watching for the new year.
Again, but no individuals charged here other than Weisselberg. So what does it mean for the organization going forward in the city? For example, would they be blocked from doing business here?
Yeah, so just to be clear, the closing from the prosecutor was Trump knew exactly what was going on. Donald Trump, the individual, and there's exhibits that show he signed off on everything. And that coincides with the Manhattan DA gearing up their department to prosecute. So we'll see what happens with individuals. But for the organization, their real risk is what Tish James is doing. And you can bet your bippy that what happened here is going to be relevant evidence in her case.
All right, legal expert Andrew Leib, sounds like there's more to this story. We'll continue to cover it. Thank you for your expertise.